parties versus the other three parties who've said they would have a higher level of borrowing and therefore debt not falling as quickly, but that would imply smaller spending cuts and less required in tax increases. Gemma Tetlow from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, thank you.
Thanks, Joko. Now, if you watched our economy debate yesterday, and I'm sure you did, it was on yesterday afternoon, there'll be another one today, you would have seen the Conservatives' David Gauke and Labour's Chris Leslie give each other a hard time. So now...
Round two.
It's not much of a bell, is it? Seconds out. It's time for round two. They're both back. Chris Leslie Chris Leslie, where are you? I forget. Where are you?
I'm in Nottingham today.
There you
How
go.
are you?
The beautiful.
It's been so long.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm missing you already. It's a beautiful city of Nottingham. David Gauke is in our studio here in Westminster. So now we know from the IMS, David Gauke, you need on the unprotected departments, these departments that you haven't ring-fenced, you need another 18% of cuts between now and 1819. Why didn't you mention that in your manifesto?
Well, what we've said is that we need to continue to reduce departmental spending at broadly the same rate that we have done over the course of this Parliament, and the IFS have confirmed that's exactly what we're doing.
But you didn't put this into your manifesto. Why would you not tell us?
We've been very clear that we have a 30...
You weren't clear. You didn't put it in the manifesto.
We have said repeatedly, I have said repeatedly on this programme, that we need to find £30 billion worth of fiscal adjustments over 2016-17 and 2017-18. £13 billion of that will be departmental spending.
Right, so let's come to this, because it amounts to another 18% cut. Now, you've already cut 18% from these unprotected departments. So in total, if we have another 5 years of Conservative government, or actually you're going to do this by 18-19, so just another 4 years of Conservative government, add it together, say between 8 and 9 years of Conservative government, you will have cut a third from the unprotected departments. And yet you cannot tell us how you're going to do the next 18%.
Well, look, we have set out, we've delivered 5 years of spending reductions in government departments, a period of time where we have seen more children educated in good or outstanding schools, where crime has fallen by a quarter, and so
protected.
But we have made a number of where satisfaction with local government has gone up. Now, we've done that for 5 years. We've set out our plans for this year, and what we're saying is that we need 2 more years of reducing departmental spending in unprotected departments at the same rate.
But can we just point out that you are in the process of taking a third out of the budgets of departments like defence, transport, law and order, social care, which comes through local authorities from central government. You're taking a third out of these vital departments, and you cannot tell us how you're going to do it.
Well, we have a track record of 5 years of doing this.
I know what you've done. I'm asking you to tell me how else are you going to do it.
We are not going to accelerate that. But look, if you look at what we have done in terms of finding savings, there is more to do. But for example,
you cannot take another 18% out of these departments on savings alone, on simply efficiency. You need to tell us what in defence, what in transport, what in law and order is going to be cut.
Well, over the last Parliament, Andrew, we found £20 billion in savings, and that's through better use of technology, through sharing services, through selling off government land. There are a whole host of things that we have done, and there is still more that we can continue to do.
Well, tell me what you do.
For example, better use of government land, selling some of that off. In terms of sharing services, there's still further progress that can be made.
Through sharing services through greater use of technology. Of government land, which is, by the way, a one-off. Selling land is a one-off. You get the receipts and that's it. You don't get the land again next year. You cannot give us, as you take an axe to the unprotected departments, you cannot give us a clear picture of what that will mean for our transport, our defence, our law and order, or our social care.
Well, I'm giving you some examples of things that we have done and that we can continue to do. But if we don't make decisions on departmental spending like that, then you end up with a position of failing to reduce our deficit. That ultimately
I'm not arguing with that.
Well, it's a really important point.
Let's supposing you're right about that. I'm trying to find out how you're going to do it, and so far answer has come there none. Let me go to Chris Leslie. So we now know if we vote Labour, we'll be adding £90 billion to the national debt. It's already 1.5 trillion, and you're going to add almost another 100 billion to it by 1920. Why?
Well, I dispute those figures. I don't believe that they're accurate, and I'll explain why that is. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, I think, have set out that the Conservatives would make more extreme cuts than any other political party, but certainly than us. That would have big damages.
To the national debt.
But what they do say is that we set out a fuller description, that's their words, of our plans for the future. And you heard Gemma Tetlow earlier on talking about how our sums add up. Those are
and
the
the
words
consequence is national debt 90 billion higher
yeah, I was coming to
than
that.
it is.
Now, there is an error in the IFS's factual analysis, and it's this. They've made an assessment that the limit of our ambitions is to get the current budget into balance. Actually, and we say this on page 1 of our manifesto, we want to get the current budget into surplus. And of course, that surplus is contingent very much on what happens in the economy, whether we can tackle this low-wage culture that the Conservatives have fostered. That is really crucial, because that action on living standards, tackling the cost of living, does have an effect on the public finances.
Hold on, you're telling me that not only are you going to balance the current budget, you're going to get it into substantial surplus, because it would need to be substantial to counteract the amount you're going to borrow to invest. And you can do all that without cutting these budgets, without cutting these departments?
Let me walk you through this then. The fiscal rule that we have is to get the current budget not just into balance but also into surplus as soon as possible in the next Parliament. Now that means what the public want to know is, can you get rid of the budget deficit by 2020? Yes, that is our plan. In fact, the IFS confirmed today that on our plans, debt and deficit will be down as we say, and the debt will start falling. Now the question is,
but hold on, you could still be running a deficit by 2020 on the IMF figures. They say up to 1.4% of GDP, so you would still be adding to the debt. And I want to know if you're going to run a surplus. You say you're clear. So let's be clear. If you're going to run a surplus, how big a surplus are you aiming for? And when will you hit that surplus? If you can't answer that, then your position is meaningless.
Well, we do, I think, have an ambition to do more than just balance the current budget. But the surplus is contingent. It depends on what happens with the economy. I mean, this is a big philosophical difference, Andrew. You know this, between us and the Conservatives. They look at public finances as though it's somehow separate from the economy. It doesn't matter what goes on with growth or with wages. We take a different view. Active government can have an effect on the economy, and in turn can have a positive effect on the public finances.
So you just hope to, I mean, the Tories have a magic money tree, and you have a magic tax tree that's going to produce all this extra tax revenue from a growing economy.
No, we've got the proof, because we've seen what happens when a government neglects the cost of living. They end up with £200 billion more of borrowing than they said they were going to do. They've had their chance with their strategy, which was just to deal with the deficit through cuts alone. It's failed. We've now got the opportunity, I think, in the next Parliament to balance the books, but not just have the current budget into balance, but get it into surplus.
I'm not going to let you get away, as I don't with the Tories, with these propaganda figures. You're not balancing the books. You're only trying to balance part of the books.
The current budget is absolutely...
So that's not the books, that's a bit of the books. But I want to hear you from on this. Are you seriously saying to me that you could move to a substantial surplus on current spending, on the current budget, simply by a growing economy and more tax revenues? Is that what you're saying?
I think we can, and I think we can do it. But what I'm not going to do is make false promises.
Okay, well, let me ask you this: because you've answered that, you say it's going to be done on tax revenue, so you don't have to go through any cuts. It's not what the IFS says.
No, that's not what I said. I didn't say we didn't have to go through cuts. We do
you
have
want
to
to
make
run a surplus. Well, let me ask you this:
It's very difficult to.
What tax buoyancy is already assumed in the OBR projections between now and 2020? How much are they assuming that tax will rise?
Oh, you're right to say they have a particular view on the trend rate of growth.
How much?
Our ambition is to change that trend rate of growth and to make sure that we deliver an economy that does bring in those revenues. And as I say, this is a philosophical difference between us and the Conservatives.
But I'm trying to work out how much. Let me tell you, since you don't know. The IFS, the OBR assumes that by 2020, per capita, the British people will be paying £2,000 a head more in tax. Now, obviously, children don't pay the tax. Richer people will pay more, poorer less. But on average, it's an extra £2,000 simply from a growing economy, not from any extra tax rises. So for your figures to work, how much extra tax revenue above £2,000 per head will you get?
We have been prepared to talk about fairer taxes for those at the top.
Oh, not again.
Oh, once again, that's the second Labour politician the plug is pulled on. OK, well, I just have to finish, and I apologise for that, viewers. There seems to be a habit here. It's like being in an episode of In the Thick of It, isn't it, when they pull the plug when it's going wrong. So, David Gauke, just to come back to you on this, we are now in no man's land. We walk into this election if we are to vote for you with a blindfold on. You cannot tell us the nature of the tax avoidance revenues you're going to get, how you're going to do that. You cannot tell us 10 billion of the welfare cuts, and this morning you've not been able to tell us what the departmental cuts will be made up of. We might as well vote blindfolded.
No, I don't accept that at all. And I think what's striking is the difference is we can say what the borrowing will be, and we mean the overall borrowing. We're not talking about just current. As I know you understand, we can say what the borrowing is. We can say what we will cut in terms of departmental spending numbers.
Excuse me, you cannot tell me that
we can say we can say what the departmental spending will be.
Tell me about the 10 billion in welfare.
Give me
one more chance at getting the 10 billion in welfare, which you have not told us anything will be done on that. Tell us about the 10 billion.
We have said that we need to find 12 billion pounds.
You've told me 2 billion.
And we've told you the details of 2.
So give me the other 10.
But again, I point you to the record that we have. No. Over the course of the last Parliament, we found 21 billion pounds of welfare spending.
No, we know all that.
And
sorry, it's not. Look, we've got David Gauke, it's not answering the question.
And the contrast with the Labour Party, you can't even tell you how much they will be borrowing. Okay. And the striking point that IFS
do you want
say
plug
90
to pull
billion.
As well?
I'm very happy to keep on going, Andrew, for as long as you want.
I'm not, because I'm not getting anywhere. Ian Dale.
I mean, I'm fed up with interviewing Tory politicians on my show who can't answer these very, very simple questions. If you make a manifesto promise, for example, to spend £8 billion more on the NHS, you have to tell us where that's going to come from. You can't just say, oh, it'll come from the proceeds of extra economic growth. That's the lazy way out. If the Labour Party, in previous elections, you've always criticised the Labour Party for making these kind of promises that aren't funded, and now the boot's on the other foot. So why can't you tell us?
To take the example of the NHS, we consider it to be a real priority. We have prioritised it over the course of this Parliament.
Why didn't you announce this £8 billion 2 or 3 months ago then? Why has it suddenly come into this election campaign?
Well, we have, if you look at our record, again, we have delivered in real terms an increase of £7.3
we know what
billion
the record is. What we're interested in is the next 5 years. That's what people are voting on.
And the next 5 years will be consistent with the last 5 years in terms of increasing the personal allowance, finding savings in the welfare budget, increasing spending on the NHS. That's what Conservative governments deliver. That's what we've delivered.
We're going to have to stop there.
It takes the voters for fools on both sides.
OK. With the lack of progress, I've put my little fool's hat on.
Neither of us succeed in this, ever, do we?
We are complete failures. David Gauke, thanks for coming back 2 days running. Chris Leslie's off to find another shilling in the meter.
Yes.
Do they still have meters?
I think we should investigate an inquiry. Pluggate.
We should just. It's been a good joke, but it was a BBC problem. It wasn't Mr. Leslie Spad pulling the plug.
Thank you for confirming that.
I've been told to say by the Director General.